quick agenda. We already went through an introduction, talk about what SEO actually is. I think most of us know that. The anatomy of a search engine result page. We want to talk about the search engine business model. Search engines themselves have a completely different business model than everybody else, and in order to do well in natural search, you kind of have to understand what they're trying to accomplish. Talk about on-page optimization wins, a lot of the triggers that are going to help move the needle. Building your brand online. Links and citations play a huge role in how you rank in the natural search algorithms. So it's one thing to have a great site, it's another thing to have the buzz and people talking about you. We're going to talk about how to create an SEO culture. Oftentimes you don't have one person that's dedicated to SEO, or you do have somebody or two people dedicated to SEO, but there's just so much going on that they're constantly in a state of cleanup. Tracking the success and talk about the takeaways and talking about questions. Starting off, SEO, search engine optimization, a lot of people call it natural search or free search, is really kind of this combination of on-site tactics and things that you do to your site from a technology perspective and how the page is constructed and site integrity, and also this off-site. We talked about links, we talked about citations, talk about building your brand and making your brand an authority online is going to help your SEO efforts because we want people talking about you. I put a little bit of sales in there because I think you need to be a little bit of an influencer in the SEO industry. Just because when you go into a room and you have to talk to your developer, you know, maybe they've been doing things a certain way for 5 years, and if you go in and tell a developer they did something wrong, it doesn't go over very well. These guys are artists. What they paint on their easel and everything is code. You know, it's all words. So saying they did it wrong is not very good. They take a lot of pride in what they do. What you want to do is kind of direct them to do things properly. Same thing from the marketing side. A lot of marketers have really good ideas, but the ideas need to be kind of backed up by data and shown the impact of how they can influence SEO. So a lot of sales and kind of educational side of SEO as well. I just put this in the deck because a lot of people like to print this out and put this up in their cubes. It's literally, you know, about 20 or 30 different things that impact SEO, from the on-page perspective, the linking perspective, and some of the penalties and filters. We'll talk about penalties and filters in a few slides, but I just wanted to keep this in mind. This is from Search Engine Land. It was actually published earlier on this year, maybe it was late last year, but it's just a nice little piece of reference material. So I wanted to include this because you'll have a copy of this deck. Afterwards, I'll make sure that it's distributed to everybody here, either through Dropbox. I'll make sure Dan has a copy of it, so anybody who wants to refer to this can grab it and go through it again. A lot of this might be known to you guys, so I'm going to go through this really quickly because if you hear me use specific terminology, this is probably what I'm referring to. A SERP, weird little word, is a search engine result page. It's everything you see after you type in the search query. A lot of people call these keywords. I'll refer to this as a search query. It's what you actually type into the search box in Google. That's a search query which results in a SERP. The filters are everything on the left-hand side of natural search, which can change the order or change the, well, filtration using for a definition of filter. Webster would have me for that one. But anything that would change your result set. Paid search, there's a bid auction in order to a completely different algorithm for paid search. You know, you can actually bid up higher and pay for your position. A lot of things in paid search carry over to natural search. I can't remember, there was a group I talked about quality score with here a little bit earlier, but if you send paid search traffic to natural search pages, increasing your quality score, which is a score from 1 to 10, as you increase your quality score, you reduce your cost per click. But by increasing your quality score, you're focusing on a lot of the best practices on SEO as well, so both of the teams will benefit from increasing quality score. Universal search, this is not just local listings. A lot of times you'll see video results, image results, news results, anything that kind of puts itself on the page that isn't really a natural search. Google used to be a really clean experience, right? There wasn't a lot of crazy colors. There wasn't a lot of extra things going on the page. It used to be all natural listings. Now we're getting into more universal listings, paid search listings, not just Google, but Bing as well and Yahoo. Natural search, this is where SEO takes place. What can we do to our site to make ourselves increase our rankings within natural search? Understanding our natural search competitors, understanding what we can do online and offline to increase those rankings. And as we look at the actual SERP, you know, when I talk about the title or the page title, it's not, you know, the H1 tag which you see in the HTML of your web page. When I refer to a title or a page title, typically what you see as the link that you would click on in the search engine. It's also what you would see in the top of your browser. We'll show that in a couple slides. The snippet itself, if it wants to click, there we go. Snippet is also referred to as the description or meta description. This is your call to action. The landing page is the page that's actually linked to when you click on the title. You can have multiple landing pages ranking for a similar term. Site links typically happen on branded terms. It's those indented listings that are maybe 4, 5, or 6 listings strong. You can manipulate them a little bit, but I can't say manipulate, but you can remove some of them through Google Webmaster Tools, but you can't tell Google Webmaster Tools which ones to include. And secondary results. That's the secondary landing page, multiple results on page 1. The more results you can have on page 1, the more real estate you own and the more you push your competitors off. If you rank number 1 and number 2, that secondary landing page, that secondary position isn't necessarily ranked number 2. It could be ranked number 10. The second it comes onto page 1, it automatically rolls up and groups up with your primary domain. So you still want to pay a little bit of attention to it to keep that real estate. And places listings just a universal listing. So moving forward, this is actually an old image, but it still holds true today. It's from 2006, but the impact and basically the point it's trying to make still holds true. Ranking in the top 3 or 4 positions naturally is where the lion's share of the click-throughs occur. If you're not in the top positions in natural search, if you're on page 2 or page 3 or page 4 for your terms, you're probably not seeing the traffic that you could be getting. And it's exponential. As you get on from page 2 to page 1, you will start seeing more visits, start seeing more click-throughs. As you get towards the top of page 1, you're seeing substantially more click-throughs in the bottom of page 1. Keep in mind that universal listings will act as a competitor in there, and just because you're ranking position 4, you could have a huge group of local listings that take up half the page. The same amount of effort to get from 4 to 3 in natural search actually moves you up above the fold and will give you a lot more increase. Do know go. Anybody here know why that's on the page? Okay. So I asked that for a reason because I want people's attention span to come back, but everybody's paying nice and good attention here. That's actually from Google themselves. So the Google Quality Rater guidelines get leaked from time to time. It was leaked last year, and this is the first time we saw Google actually put search queries into 3 distinct buckets. So anytime you search for something on Google, and I keep referring to Google, but please understand they're a large part of the market share. When I say Google, I mean the search engines. So if they can take every single search query and put it in one of 3 buckets, I think that's pretty substantial. So they put it into a do category, no category, and go category. Do is they want to perform some kind of an action. They want to buy something. They want to read something. They want to research something. Well, research is no, right? Research are those no keywords, typically where you see your Wikipedia results, right? Your informational results. And then the go is I'm looking for a specific site. I'm looking for a specific product, very, very specific search query. When you're optimizing your keywords, when you're trying to determine which keywords you should rank for, understanding your conversion metrics is very important in the do, no, go mentality. Looking at page 1 and looking at what's ranking on page 1 will help you determine if it's worth, kind of attacking that search query or keyword. So this goes back to kind of your keyword optimizations. We'll get to that in a couple slides here, but just want to call out that's from Google themselves. Every keyword can be put into one of 3 buckets. And this is kind of this is what I get most excited about in these presentations, is actually talking about what search engines do. Everybody's got a business model, everybody online. So I'm going to talk about the 10 top things that search engines do and their business model and how they stay in business. So the number one priority for a search engine, obviously, is to serve the most relevant results based on the user search query. If I'm looking for red running shoes, I don't want to show blue running shoes, right? I want to make sure they're all red. Trying to understand the sentiment, trying to understand exactly what a user is looking for and giving them those results. So this guy here, he's searching for, let's say he's searching for buy running shoes. What do you guys think should show up for that, right? We should maybe see some brands, right? If I'm looking to buy running shoes, I think I should see Adidas, Under Armour, Nike. These brands, if they showed up on page 1, we probably wouldn't think twice, right? It'd probably be a good result set. What about Zappos, Dick's Sporting Goods, and Amazon? If these showed up on page 1, we probably wouldn't think twice either, right? We would probably expect to see these. Now we've got more information. We've got a place we can go and buy them, or we've got a specific brand. All of these probably want to rank #1 for buy running shoes. Believe it or not, if you search for buy running shoes, you get a lot of informational queries. WebMD, About.com, and Wikipedia actually show up on page 1 for buy running shoes. That was a couple months ago. If somebody can check for me really quick. But I know for a fact that WebMD was ranking number 9 or 10. Wikipedia was on there, and About.com. For a buy-related query. It doesn't really make sense, but keep in mind that Google's trying to give you as much information as possible. They don't want to serve too many duplicates. What shows up? Do they show up on page 1 still?
Yeah, there's an About.com, Amazon, Yelp.
Yelp, yeah.
New York Times, Runner's World.
So not a lot of, they're not all e-commerce. And then this is a buy-related query, right? I'm looking to buy something, yet I'm not getting all e-commerce-related queries. Some of them, WebMD shows you what type of running shoes you can buy and how it can impact your knees and your ankles, and then how it can affect your, your health. The second thing that they want to do is they want to identify what's popular. Google's whole search engine algorithm was based around links. Links were actually the first form of social media. Before you could do it in 140 characters, people would share information by writing content about a product or a page and link to it. And that's the way people shared information. The search engine, or the original search engine of Google, went through and it counted links. Who had the most links should rank higher. Of course, people figured that out pretty quickly, manipulated it, and over time, we'll talk about this in a few slides, people manipulated that, and it gets much harder. But links are still a very valuable asset for most of the major search engines. They want to return highly relevant results quickly. Their time on site, they say an average page load time for the user should be half a second. Right? We know page load time is one of the metrics in the search engine algorithms, but I have yet to see a really good high authority site load everything in half a second. I just haven't seen that yet. But Google likes to think that all of their results, everything should happen in half a second. You'll see here all of the calculations that go on the back end for everything you type in to happen in less than half a second. Honestly, I give the search engines a lot of credit to be able to perform that. Serving and providing one source of information for each unit of content. If you were to see the exact same thing 20 times on the first 2 pages, that's not really a good user experience. And if you're not getting that variety, you're probably going to stop using that search engine. Identifying and removing spam and artificial results. Obviously, these aren't the real people, but they want to find people. And if we look back at some of the algorithm updates, there was an update called Vince in 2009 that really attacked this hard. If you were pretending to be a brand and selling a brand online, Google honestly wants to remove those. They want people to identify if they're an affiliate or identify if they are not the real brand. And a lot of credit is given to high authority brands and domains. They don't like people posing as somebody else. Obviously, if you're manipulating the search engines, they want to find you and they want to remove you. And I mean, that makes sense. They have the smartest scientists in the world, supposedly. They don't like it when people figure out, what they've been doing. Up-to-date information. News is huge. Anytime there's new content that's buzzworthy that people are talking about, they want to serve that because they assume it's what people are looking for. There's a couple examples of this. George Bush is a good example. If the search engine was as strong a couple years ago, 4 years ago, as it was 14 years ago, you would see a completely different result set for George Bush. Right? You had 2 distinct George Bush presidents. One has a W, but if I'm searching 5 years ago, theoretically, I'd be looking for the one that's in office at that current time. Not serving broken or malicious pages. Believe it or not, Google does their due diligence to try to find if there's any malicious intent happening on a web page. And if there is, they'll send a warning through WebmasterTools saying that they found some malicious action happening on there just in case the site got hacked. But they will also tend to remove those from their search algorithm. They don't want somebody searching on Google and then going and getting a virus on their site. That's probably the worst user experience possible. Obviously, if a page is broken, serving a 500 error, a 404, that's not a really good user experience either. They served up a result, you go to click on the page, and all of a sudden it's not there. So they want to serve this really good user experience, and broken and malicious pages just doesn't work. Including universal results, going to fly through that. Obviously, they want to discover as much web content as possible, so we need to make sure that our sites are built properly so the search engines can crawl them and traverse their way through all of our content. Number one reason, bring people back. If they can keep bringing people back to their search engine, they continue to make money. They got a lot of people to employ. You know, they've got thousands of people on their payroll. In order to pay for them, people have to click on their paid advertisements or use their services. Most of Google services are free. Is there anybody here who does not use any Google services or Google products? So I can't remember the philosopher that said this or the person who said this, but I just think it's funny. He said that if you receive something for free, you're the one who's being sold. So if you think, I use Google products all the time, but think about the amount of data that they're constantly collecting, right? They try to put email results into your search experience over on the right-hand side, right? A little creepy in my mind, but the amount of data that they have access to and they're crawling is immense. So before we get into the triggers, I want to look at the history of the search engines. You know, in order to move forward, we have to understand their business model and see where they've been and the changes they've made, and that'll help us, you know, build strategies to move forward. This is just from 2000 to 2009. Typically, they'll release Google will release one major named algorithm change each year. There's over 500 changes made to the algorithm on a yearly basis. A lot of them go unnoticed. The big ones, the major ones, get named, and those will impact a single to a double-digit percentage of search queries. If we look going back to 2003, there's a lot of updates here. Cassandra is one, Dominic is another one, Fritz, Stephanie, Yeager, Gilligan. A lot of these revolved around links. You know, people started figuring out how to manipulate links to do better in the search engine. So there's a constant attack that Google takes on people manipulating links because it is a major part of their algorithm. You look at some of the other things, there's a lot of content-related search algorithm updates on here as well, too. Recently, we know of the ones Panda and Penguin. I don't know if you guys have heard those names. They're two of the most recent ones over the last year that have happened. Panda now happens about once a month. There's a data refresh once a month on Panda. Penguin has had one refresh, but that's literally been one that was Penguin was specifically built to attack web spam, keyword stuffing, doorway pages, you know, aggressive links. Panda is more about duplicate content, thin content, serving the same content as everybody else. So as we build these, these strategies moving forward, keep in mind that we know links are important. We also know that if we can get them in an aggressive manner, search engines have a good probability of finding them out. We have to derive really good strategies that'll pull us through. And we're going to talk about some ways we can do that here in a few slides. Same thing with Panda. If we're going to produce content, we want to make sure we're producing content that has some kind of uniqueness, that has some kind of value moving forward. And we were going to talk about authorship too, and I'm going to try to bring authorship into links discussion because that's something that's been hot on the minds in SEOs over the last year. It's not really a linking strategy per se. It's more of an authority strategy, and being an authority online is huge for the longevity of the site. This is what happens if you do something improperly. If you try to manipulate the search engines, if you do some keyword stuffing, if you do some aggressive link building, and don't follow the quality guidelines, this is a real example of what happens overnight. April 24th, Penguin came out. As I said, that was specifically designed to attack web spam. This is a site that's getting 40,000 to 20,000 organic visits from Google per day. And you can see that up the top. This is from Google Analytics. Source is Google organic search traffic. Averaging 20,000 per day, April 24th, down to nothing. The only thing they were ranking for is branded terms. You want to talk about a bad conversation to have when you come in on a Tuesday morning. This is not one you want to have. Lost 16,000 visits per day at a 2.75 conversion rate and $25 revenue per conversion, $11,000 a day in lost contribution. That's over $4 million a year in lost contribution. It's real, it happens, and Google is not afraid to make an example of a big brand or a small brand. This is 15% of site-wide contribution. Now, if you think this site had a lot of inbound calls, so they had a large call center, they had to fire 15% of their staff. We've seen sites get negative, and when I say we, I mean the industry, had seen sites get negatively impacted by search engine algorithms because they were being aggressive and go completely under where they're firing entire teams. And so, when we talk about building strategies, we want to make sure we're building strategies that are going to, last long term. Yes?
Oh, so I remember hearing about like something JC Penney did. Was that?
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about JC. I'll show you data behind JC too. Great use case. So when we talk about link building, we're definitely going to hit on JC Penney here. The Penguin update happened on a Tuesday. Can you imagine, I don't think anybody has a ton of free time on their hands, especially in SEO. If this happens on a Tuesday and you get hit, you pretty much clear your schedule because you've got a lot of things to research and a lot of answers to make. Now, a lot of companies will benefit from algorithm changes, especially the ones that are high authority and are doing things right. So just because some got penalized doesn't mean that the ones underneath them didn't all of a sudden see a big boost. So this does go in the opposite direction. We do see sites, go up and to the right, and that's ideal. That's what we want to have happen here. So if it goes up and to the right, we still want to do the same amount of data research as if we went down and to the right. I said up and to the right before, right? All right, just making sure. So, we want to analyze our wins just as strong as we analyze our losses. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, because we want to understand what's working for our niche, what's working for our site, and replicate. So the gentleman listed on this page here is a gentleman by the name of Matt Cutts. He is the head of the Google Web Spam team. It is his team that will go in and perform a manual action on your site. Google doesn't say penalty, when they go ahead and take your site out of the index. They call it manual action. If you fall victim to an algorithm change, you are filtered. Through certain actions on your site, you can remove yourself from a filter. Manual action, on the other hand, requires you to repent and send in what's called a re-inclusion request into Google, and it goes into Matt Cutts' teams. He said, and this was a couple years ago, I would say there's probably 250 now, but he hasn't updated his quote. He said we have over 200 signals in our scoring to try to return the most relevant, most useful, and most accurate search results that we can find. What that means is if your homepage ranks for 2 terms, there's 400 triggers, right? 3 terms, there's 600 triggers. Every single term to landing page combination, there's 200 triggers that they look at to figure out the relevancy. Now keep in mind that there are so many different ways you can put in those keywords into Google, and they return all of those results in less than half a second. The amount of calculations that are going onto your site on it every time it gets crawled and indexed is immense. And not only is it giving yourself a scoring based on those 200 triggers, it's put in a scoring methodology compared to all of the competition that could potentially rank for that as well. So there's a lot going on. We want to make sure that we can capture as much of that as possible. So let's talk about some of those factors. If you want to do some additional research and really, really get geeky and really geek out, especially your IT guys, this is from 2011. It's from SEO Mods. It's the search engine ranking factors. It's a great post. Conductor contributed to that. They surveyed over 100 top professionals in the industry and asked them to rate certain triggers and the value and strength of certain triggers throughout the page. And I want to say there's over 100 to 200 different questions here. Again, this will be in the deck when it passes out. If you don't have to write down that URL, you'll be able to copy and paste it. But just a really good read if you want to see not just, we know that the trigger is important, but what is that trigger valued? How important is each specific trigger? So we'll talk about some of those triggers right now. As I said before, there's a lot of things that move SEO. Site integrity and site structure, I believe, are the most important, hands down. Then we have our online currency, again, our links, our citations. User experience, a lot of people debate that. I believe that a positive user experience can breed some really good SEO. If you provide a good user experience and a really great product, people are just generally going to talk about you. And then training. SEO is ongoing training, not just for you, but for your entire teams and your entire organization. So this slide I'm going to take my time on. This, I think, is probably one of the most important slides in the deck. It's also one of the most that is hardest to describe and most easy to be confused when I'm discussing this. So any questions on this, stop me immediately. I want to talk about the relationship between that online currency, those links, those citations, the relationship between those and site integrity and site structure. So on the left side here, we've got our marketing efforts. We're going and we're attracting links. We're attracting buzz. We're building our brand online. We're trying to get people to link to us or to somehow get our name out there. On the right side, we've got the landing page that we're trying to promote. Right? We want people to link to this page, and that's what we're looking at here, is that relationship between a link and a landing page. When we build a landing page, there's certain things going on our site that we can control from a site architecture perspective. These aren't ordered in any specific order. This is just a bunch of random different triggers here, but your URL, your page title, how your internal linking's done, your meta descriptions, all of these things are taken into that calculation of 200 triggers, right? When the search engines come through and they crawl your page, this is what they identify as being relevant for that page. Now, if your page is just an image, it's going to be very hard for them to put relevancy behind them. So as we're sending, and I'm going to call this link equity. You're going to hear me refer to this term link equity all of the time. When you have a link, when you have a citation, it starts with a certain amount of authority that's going to pass to you, a certain amount of equity that it's going to be able to hand over to you. That equity is diminished before it gets to your site based on how many blockers and how many of those triggers it has to get through that are irrelevant. So let's say this link says widget, and I'm trying to get this landing page to rank for the term widget, right? The authority for widget or widgets, plural, that my page is going to get all determines on how my page is constructed and how many triggers are, have widget in them. Is it widget in the URL? Is it in the title? Is it in the body tag? Is it in the H1? All of those areas pay dividends. As we are able to optimize for all of these blockers, we're able to make sure that more authority, more link equity is passed through from our links to our landing page, right? Because we've identified to the bots that our page is the leading authority and is completely about this term. So I always tell people to start with your on-page optimization. Make sure your integrity is there. Make sure all of the triggers are populated. You will rank decently, especially for tail terms and terms without a lot of competition, for just your on-page tactics. You can definitely rank without doing any linking at all, assuming that it's a low competitive term. You are going to hit a plateau once you've optimized that page to the best of your ability until you start with the link building practices. So even though you start with online, you still need to do that offline citation building. Does that make sense? Anybody have questions on this slide here? Does that make sense? Cool. Any questions so far before we dive into the single page stuff?
My biggest question is, early on you said when you're talking about Google, you're talking about all search engines.
Yes.
Are there, is Bing constantly playing a game of catch up? Are they just kind of recreating what Google does? Or, are there differences that we should be mindful of?
It's funny you say, is Google, kind of following Google's tracks. Google actually identified that Bing was scraping Google's results and modifying their search engine based on what Google was providing. You can search for that. I won't get into detail, but they are definitely doing it, and they're still doing it. And there's ways to manipulate Bing through that. I don't want to talk about manipulation tactics here, but there's definitely some things you could do to make yourself do well in Bing. Some of the spammier tactics do help Bing a little bit more. They're not as concerned with relevancy behind links. So just because JCPenney got dinged by Google, they didn't really get dinged as hard in Bing. That being said, if you want to rank well just in Bing, there's probably some things you could do if you don't really care about Google, but Google being 65% of the market share, when I mention Google a lot, that's the reason why, just because they are the dominant player here. Most of the search engines follow a lot of the same best practices. A lot of the same algorithms based on on-site optimization still remain the same. A lot of them still look at links and citations and your social media mentions as well. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and it sounds like if you're doing well for Google, you're going to be doing well
for all of us. Yes, indeed.
Great.
Any others? All right. So content is king. We talk about content. In order to rank well in search engines, you've got to have the content to back it up. I mean, that's plain and simple. We need to optimize the content to the best of our ability. I love word clouds. When I have content writers bring me a block of content, I should have put this tool on here. It's called Wordle, W-O-R-D-L-E. I want to say it's .net. Has anybody heard of that? I know it sounds weird, but you could take a paragraph or two of content or a URL, paste it into Wordle, and it'll give you one of these, right? It'll give you one of these word clouds. And what I like about word clouds, when I'm looking at somebody's content that they created, I can start anticipating what kind of tail traffic I can get from that content and how I can optimize that content from an external perspective. So if this were my word cloud, I immediately see Google Analytics, I see management, developed management and marketing. I might try to create some creative marketing buzz around a lot of those top terms, but if the term that I want this page to rank for doesn't show up prominently, I know there's a problem, right? I know I have to go back to the content creators and say, you did a good job, but we're still not really focused on what we need to be focused on. I talked about this with somebody earlier today. Ubersuggest.org is a great way for finding related keywords. So if I'm writing content around cloud computing, if you're familiar with Google Suggest, what they will do is they will pop up the top 4 or 5 results that users are looking for the most. There's great opportunity there to understand what our users are looking for, because content creators will constantly say, I'm writing content for the user, not for the search engines. Well, if you're creating content for the user, let's figure out what the user is really looking for. This is great user behavior. This is great to figure out exactly what the user wants. It's not based on content developers' opinion. It's based on a lot of data that's been aggregated over a long period of time. So Uber suggests what it'll do. If you were, after cloud computing here, if you were to hit space A, you would get the top, A terms, B, C, and D. What Uber suggests will do is it'll give you all of those terms, A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. You can export it, and you have a list of terms that people associate with cloud computing. Now, I'm not going to go and optimize that page for 300 terms. It's just not going to happen. But if I can find the most prominent terms there, hand them over to the content writer and say, hey, do me a favor, just read this page before you write the content, and next thing you know, you're peppering in all of these tail terms, making that page more relevant around the topic. All of these secondary terms are relevant towards the primary term. Does that make sense? And for those of you who use AdWords, what you could do, once you've identified those words, stick them here in the Google AdWords keyword tool, and now you can get impression volume. So now you have a list of terms that you think you want to include on the page, but now we know how many people are looking for that term, and you can actually pick your terms even smarter. This process takes no time at all. I could probably do keyword research in 2 or 3 minutes. The more you do it, the faster it gets. If you can teach your content creators to do this every time before they write content, I want to give my content creators maybe 3 or 4 top keywords. Maybe it's 1. But if they can do this process off those 2 or 3 keywords and then write the content, that content has a much greater chance of ranking for tail-related terms. Tail terms are, those long search queries, that people are typing in. Does that make sense? But once we've got our keywords, we want to publish it. But once we publish it, it needs to be found, right? The search engines aren't going to do anything unless they can find the content. So how do we get the search engines to find our content? You can submit sitemaps, XML sitemaps. I should put Google and Bing WebmasterTools. Bing WebmasterTools has gotten much better over the last 2 years. If you're not using Google and Bing WebmasterTools, I highly suggest using both. Bing WebmasterTools just released their Open Site Explorer data, which is backlink data. That used to be open to everybody a couple of years ago, and they took it down, I think, last year. Now they're bringing it back through the Bing WebmasterTools, so a great tool to use, and a lot of great tools in Google WebmasterTools, just from an internet marketing perspective. You can submit images and videos in their own distinct sitemap as well. All the top search engines will take that in. Internal linking, great way to get your content syndicated and indexed through the search engines. So through your pagination, through your, any kind of creative internal linking that you could do, definitely going to help get that content picked up. And external linking. If you create a new content, tweet it. Put a link out there somewhere. Somehow get some kind of buzz out there to get people to find that page. And if Google goes to index that Twitter profile, or they're indexing that page where the link exists, they're going to jump over and they're going to find your content. So once it's found your content, I'm going to jump over this. We can have the best looking page in the world, but it doesn't matter. This is how the search engines see your page, right? The crawlers see it by the code. Don't worry about how pretty it is. Worry about how pretty it looks on the back end. I showed a lot of you this tool this morning. This is a quick page audit tool. It's going to show you some of the triggers that we're going to talk about here in a couple of seconds. It will crawl your entire site. Well, I'm sorry. The free version will crawl 500 URLs, 500 pages. Starts on your home page, looks at your internal linking, crawls through. Paid version's 99 euros. Somebody can do the math, 150 bucks a year. But it gives you some really great information, and it doesn't impact your analytics at all. So it'll give you your URL, status codes, titles, meta description, meta keywords, your H1s, H2s. The Canonical link, if it exists, it'll show you what page that is canonical to. We'll talk about that here in a second. And also your internal and external linkings. Another free tool for a single page audit is called SEO Page Explorer, all1word.com. If you're looking for some basic information on a specific landing page from the technical perspective, you can quickly toss that in, and you can actually see what this page would look like in a text-based browser, right? Again, how the search engines might view this page. Another free tool that I like to look at is called URI Valet when I'm doing a site audit. What I like to look at here, especially when looking at my competitors, is I can change the user agent, which is who's viewing that page, and I can make it look like I'm Google. So I can see if anybody's doing something a little funny or any kind of redirects if Google were to visit. But this is a great way to check on your IT team to make sure that the redirect is going through properly if you put in a request for a 301 redirect. I'm going to skip through page titles. We talked a little bit about this earlier. This is the HTML in your code where the title exists. The URL and the page title, in my mind and the mind of most SEOs, are the two most prominent triggers for SEO. There are two things that can literally move you around from an on-page perspective. Meta description, we talked about that too, is where the snippet is. Another great place for your keywords. It's a trigger as well. It's a smaller trigger, but it's also a call to action. If you've got a lot of offline conversions, great place to put a unique phone number. 1-800, here's another phone number that's not the same phone number that you use on your site. Now you have direct attribution back to SEO because the only place you'll see that phone number served is in the search engines. Or if somebody's just viewing your page from the code perspective, which nobody does. So if you want direct attribution for offline sales to go directly towards SEO, populate it in the meta description with a unique phone number that's, direct attribution. I'm all about finding ways to get SEO as much attribution as possible, so then you get increased budgets, you can do a little bit more with your marketing channel. Image optimization, there's a lot of things you can do to your image that not only help the page rank for that term, but also help the image rank within the image results. And we see a lot of the image results now show up in universal search results. But again, it's another trigger on the page. So when we're building our images, we want to make sure that the title of the image or the file name of the image has our keyword in it, or our primary keyword as much as possible. The directory path, maybe, if you can't get the file name, maybe the directory path for your images is broken up in such a way where it's keyword specific. But there's also the alt attribute, which resides in the HTML behind the image that explains what an image is about. That's another great place to put your primary key terms. Again, we don't want to stuff this. We don't want to do it really aggressively, but we definitely want to make sure that they're there. A lot of different content triggers are going on this page right now. Sure. Each one has its own value and strength. We talked about the title.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
How have you found the relationship between the names of images specifically and where you might rank relative to the business terms used in the name of the image?
That's a good question. So how does the image file name impact SEO?
Exactly.
Yep. So what we're doing here is if we're looking at the HTML of a page and we are a robot and we're slicing and dicing through it, trying to figure out what this page is relevant for and how we should rate this on the term of relevancy compared to all the other competitors that are out there. As a robot, I don't know exactly what that image looks like. I could do some speculation, but the only way I can really tell what this image is about and what this image contains is through the alt attribute and the file name. Those are really the only two areas where I can put attribution to a keyword relationship on the page. So it's another place to put the keywords. If we look at the density of the keyword in the code of the page, definitely going to help. We don't want to do it in comments or anything like that. But again, we're trying to show the search engines that, hey, I've got content that's about this keyword. I've got images that are about this keyword. Everything on this page points to this specific keyword. I must be the relevant authority. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. When we talk about keyword density, I'm not going to say that a density of 1.82% is what you need to go after, or 4.3 is the density you should go after. This image that I have here is probably a poor image. This is more of a category-specific image without a lot of content on it. When the tool we see over on the right-hand side, the grid there that has the repeats and the density and the found in, that's from a tool. It's a plugin for Firefox and Chrome called SEO Quake. Great tool, show you a lot of different on-page factors. And what we're looking here is we want to see what terms are repeated the most on this page. So if you think about it, I should rank well for the terms that are repeated the most. I mean, that just, that kind of makes sense, goes hand in hand. So if we're going to optimize our page for specific terms, we should see that show up here in the top 3 or 4 terms. Your internal navigation plays a huge role in how specific pages rank for specific terms on your site. If you've got a global navigation and you link to a specific page using the term red widgets, as a search engine, I'm going to assume that that page on your site should be the primary authority for red widgets, right? We need to back that up with our external linking. If we all of a sudden link to 2 different pages using the term red widgets, we're going to confuse the search engine. They're not sure which page you want to be the authority for that content. Same thing with the external linking. So we have to make sure that we're not duplicating our efforts throughout our sites. But if we link in global navigation, obviously we don't want to link to every single page in our global nav, right? But the pages that we link to the most in our global nav will be pretty much the second tier level pages on our site. The more you have, I would say the less authority that gets handed to them. This was actually kind of manipulated in the past where if you assume you start out with 100 points and you have 100 links on your page, each link gets 1 point of authority. If you have 50 links, each link gets 2 points of authority, right? So keep that in mind. As you distribute the authority, the more pages you have in your global navigation, the less importance that they will play, the less of that huge authority factor that they will have. Breadcrumbs are a great way of putting secondary keywords. So think of this in the geo-specific area. If you were to have geo-level pages, you would have at the city level or even the town level, maybe the town would go back to the major metro, would go back to the state, would go back to the country, or go back to like a local page which would list all of your states. Always try to find a nice little hierarchy that you can backlink to, that you can direct your customers back through, if that makes sense. You'll also find that some terms that show up in the search engines will have extra links that match your breadcrumbs. Very hard to optimize for, but it definitely happens quite often, where you'll have like 3 or 4 little green links under your meta description, and you can click on those and actually traverse through the directory structure of your site. There's a big correlation between how your breadcrumbs are set up and the directory structure of the URL. Just a little bonus there on how to optimize for breadcrumbs. Talked about meta description, meta keywords. Google came out and said that they don't use the keywords as a trigger anymore. The reason for that being is a lot of people were manipulating that. They'd have like 500 keywords, and half of those keywords, or 80% of them, wouldn't even physically be on the page. I'm an old school SEO. I still use meta keywords. I didn't hear that come from Bing and Yahoo and all my other, secondary search engines. I'm still going to use that. But there's no way in heck I'm going to put a term in my meta keywords if it doesn't physically exist in any of the triggers or the body content of the page. I think that's a spammy tactic. I want to make sure they're relevant because I want them to be counted. This is a real-world example of 20 individual sites that show the exact same content. These are sites that were scraping the HTML of the mothership site. And this causes major, major problems. It can definitely cause problems for your site if it's not crawled properly. And we have a real-world example here in a couple slides. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we have the unique offering for our content, for our primary triggers, right? We're about news feeds. We don't want to take content from somebody else and put their content out about what we're using here. This is the real-world example, okay? Estee Lauder is a customer of ours going through a site audit. I'm looking at one of their products. This is an Estee Lauder product, okay? They built all of the content around this product, and this happens more often than not. I can say I could probably find this on half of our clients. It's actually a phenomenon that it just blows my mind how often this happens in the marketplace. This is really the first thing I do when I do a site audit, and a lot of you who were here this morning kind of saw me go through this practice while I was kind of going through the sites. Take a sentence or 2 sentences of either a product level, even your homepage, right? Put that in quotes in Google. So put that whole string of text in quotations in Google and search for it. If that's your unique content, if you spent the money on your content writers or outsourcing to get that content written, you should be showing up number 1, right? You're looking for an exact match of all of those terms in Google and Bing and Yahoo. There's no reason why you should be 2, 3, or 4 or not show up at all. This is a real-world example of, and this happened on Market America. I'll actually use them as an example of what happened. Their pagination, everybody knows what pagination is? Page 2, 3, and 4 of a category. Their pagination for women's clothing, page 2 was the exact same URL as page 99. So Google wasn't able to really traverse through their entire category structure. Same thing for page 2 through 99 of electronics. exact same URL as women's clothing. You couldn't share the URLs, you couldn't link to the URLs. It was just a very poorly indexed site. Now, they had 600,000 resellers worldwide, or affiliates, if you will. Now, affiliates are smart, and they're very, very crafty. They want to rank in SEO, and before the Vince update, a lot of affiliates would actually capitalize on branded terms because big businesses weren't focused on SEO, so they would capture branded terms. Now, if my site isn't indexed properly and I release this new content or this new product, my affiliate grabs it first, publishes it on his site, gets the links, and search engines find this page first and not this page, chances are this page over here is going to get the authority for it. A lot of it has to do with where it finds the information first. If there's no links out there, if there's no authority being credited back to the original source, the one that's found first is going to get credit for it. Now, I did that with a little disclaimer down there. If at the bottom of the content your affiliates had a link back to your product page, that gives the credit to your product page, right? Then it's okay. But then you'll also be showing up #1 here in Google when you search for your product. So always audit the content on your site and make sure that you're showing up. If you are a reseller, if you're taking a manufacturer's product descriptions and reselling a product, make sure you show up on the first page or two. Make sure you at least show up in the results to make sure that that page is getting indexed. Does that make sense? It's very real, and if you have content, people are scraping it, hands down. If you're a well-known site, people are repurposing it. And that's where you might need to get legal in the way, too. You know, if you find somebody that's actually replicating your site or replicating your content, you might have to go to the legal team and say, hey, this person's, doing something malicious, could potentially be causing us harm through SEO. You guys need to go send a cease and desist. Then it's out of your hands, but at least they know that you're on top of things. Internal duplicate content, again, happens all of the time. We talked about URL structure. Does everybody here, how about people on the phone? I'll look for a yes or no to get everybody involved. Do you guys know what query string parameters are?
Yes.
What yes? Yes. Okay. So query string parameters are, the extra variables that come after a question mark in the URL, right? Name equals Brian, and last equals McDowell, and hometown equals Charlotte, right? All those crazy things that come at the end of the URL. Certain query string parameters don't change the content of the page for certain sites, right? So you have duplicate content issues. Through no fault of your own, maybe your category structure tree, maybe you have the same product in 2 different categories, so it has 2 distinct URLs. The problem with that is we talked about the importance of links. We'll talk about link building strategies here in a couple seconds, but links and link equity are so important online that if it's shifted and if it's distributed through 3 or 4 different URLs, it confuses the search engines as well. And they're probably going to give credit to the page on your site that, one, has the most internal links to it, whatever page you're linking to the most. Secondly, it's going to look at the external links, who has the most external links. Just because you link to it the most doesn't mean the rest of the world thinks another page is more important. It's also going to look at your sitemaps. If one is in the sitemaps and one isn't, that's going to act as a tiebreaker. The problem is we have all of this link equity distributed between 3 different pages. If we can combine that to one page using a 301 redirect or a canonical link, and I'll explain both here in a second, we can put all of that to one page. We're making that page more powerful. And the opportunity for that page to rank well in the search engine's natural search algorithm becomes much, much greater. Again, link equity. We want to funnel it down to a specific page. So this is an example of the canonical link element. So we talked about a 301 redirect is a permanent redirect. It will take a user who went to homepage.com/index to homepage.com. It will redirect and change the URL and change the page the user is on. A lot of times you can't do that with the back-end infrastructure. Some sites just aren't set up to handle that. Instead of changing what page the user is seeing, you can direct the link equity, and all of the search engines in February 2009 said that they accepted this protocol. Using this canonical link element, which resides in the header of the HTML, you can say that the authority for this content, which it should be fairly duplicate, it should be fairly similar, the authority for this content here is really over here. So instead of a 301 redirect, you put a canonical link element. Now the user doesn't change pages, right? The user doesn't get a crazy experience where they have to wait for the server to respond. They're served the same content, the same URL, but the link equity is moving somewhere else. So the user isn't impacted. and all of the equity is shifted over. A great way to manage duplicate content issues on site if IT can't do those redirects. Does that make sense? See a lot of heads nodding? Awesome. 404s. I am very passionate about this. You'll hear me preach about this like crazy. 404s drive me nuts. I think it's a bad user experience. I also think it's a bad SEO experience. We see a lot of 404s when people go through site migrations. There are 404s that happen naturally, right? If you do a space or a capital letter in a directory structure, it's possible you'll get a 404, page not found, because it just doesn't exist. And I just kind of want to explain what happens with 404s here. So let's say we go to look at this specific page here, and this is from a user experience perspective. I go and I look to see if the page exists, and if the server finds the page, I get the page. That's the experience we're all used to. If it doesn't exist, maybe we'll get a 404, and it's not a good user experience, right? Sometimes we get a soft 404. We get a page that says, sorry, that page isn't found, right? Either a server page or it's that nice little, happy page that the company has put together. If we can manage the 404s from a link equity perspective, this is what happens. Let's say briansblog.com decides to link to FirstMark, FirstMarkCap.com. But I messed up the directory structure. So the link equity that I could have been passing to you, it looks to see if the page exists. If it does, awesome, I just sent some link equity your way, which we know is gold. We know how important that is. If it doesn't exist, all of a sudden that link equity is terminated. It doesn't matter about the user experience. You're not getting equity. You're not getting that vote that I just gave you that's so important. So what we like to do, again, from both a user perspective and a link equity perspective, is we want to put in a 301 redirect from our 404 page to the page that actually exists, that should be getting that link equity. Two things happen. Search engines are happy, right? They're directed to a proper page. Users are happy. It's a great user experience. And we're getting link equity. In Google WebmasterTools, you can actually see a report of people who are linking to you improperly and the URL that they're trying to link to. What you can do is you can look at that URL, and based on your structure, you can kind of anticipate where they were trying to link to, and you got two choices, right? I can go to you who tried to link to me, and I can say, hey, you linked to the wrong page. Can you please change the link? It's going to help me out with SEO. And as a webmaster, you're going to say, that's a lot of work. I got other things to do. Screw you, buddy. Oh, sorry, or forget about you. I'm not going to do that. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe I don't want to link to you anymore because now you're bugging me, and I'm going to remove the link altogether, right? Instead of doing that, you don't even need to be involved. I will fix the link on my side. I will put in that 301 redirect, and now everybody's happy. And I didn't even have to get you to do any more work. So when you first start managing your 404 report, it might be a little bit daunting. There might be quite a few out there. If you manage this on a weekly basis, it becomes much easier. This is the most simple form of link building you could possibly do. People are linking to you naturally. You're just not getting credit or authority from it. So the cleanest and most effective way of link building is processing your 404 reports. Speaking of which, Google Webmaster Tools, I highly suggest that each of you play around in there. Make sure it's enabled on your site and verified for your site. This is where you can submit sitemaps to help Google index all of your pages. Robots.txt I'm not going to talk about in much detail here, but it's a way for you to tell the search engines not to index, not to serve specific directories of your site. This is good and bad if you're going to test out a new directory structure. You can put it in robots.txt initially and then open it up. The problem is all your competitors will see it and everything else eventually anyway. You can manage those site links, the crawl errors. You can see how often pages are being indexed. Just a great tool. A lot of good best practices come right out of Google Webmaster Tools. We'll even show you duplicate titles and duplicate descriptions, which we found through our site audit, so you can manage those through here as well. Does anybody have server downtime in here or on the phone? Okay, I'm going to skip over this. I freak out over server downtime because I know the search engines are still hitting my site and they don't like to serve 404 broken pages or 500s. So anytime the site's down, I can actually calculate approximately how many pages Google tries to access on my site. So that's when I really get frustrated running around the room making sure the servers get back up. Page load times, we talked about that. It is a part of the search engine algorithms, both in paid search and natural search. What constitutes a really good page load time? I'd love to tell you 4.3 seconds. I don't know. Google says it's half a second. I think that's completely unrealistic. I think if you're within 3 to 6 range, you should be okay. If you're over 6 or 7, not only are you losing users, you're probably losing a little bit of dirt that you can get from the search engine as well. This is about the 3rd or 4th time I've been presenting the slide in this way. I used to have a picture of an iceberg when I would talk about this. So I like to view sites and taxonomy as a large iceberg, right? You're going to see the tip of the iceberg, and that's going to be your top-level page and the top categories that are linked to from your site. So when you see this big graphic here on the left, think of that as the tip of the iceberg. Everything else is what's under the water, right? It's really the depth of your site and how all of that relevancy rolls up to the tip of the iceberg. So as you go down through a categorical level, and I'm just going to use e-commerce here because I think it's the easiest to use in this description. As I go into clothing, right, and then from clothing I go to men's clothing, and then from men's clothing I go to shirts and pants, right? If I get links coming into my men's shirts category, those links and that authority rolls up to the men's clothing category, rolls up to the clothing category, rolls up to the root domain. We don't want all of our links and all of our authority coming just to the top page and our top category pages, because the iceberg's going to flip upside down, right? It's just not, it's not real. That's not really what happens. If we're truly an authority, we still have a ton of links coming to our primary pages, but if you look at the reach of our links and the reach of our citations, a lot of that happens under the water where we don't see. It's the pages that are getting 1 link, 2 links, a few links here or there. So as we get into link building, we want to make sure that we don't neglect the bottom level pages. On the right-hand side, again, that's from Google WebmasterTools. This is a look at the entire site, all of the content across the entire site, all rolled up into the top 20 keywords across the whole site. I think that's important to look at from time to time. You want to make sure that you're not diverting from your cause, right? From what.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
Relative to content that might be published in a PDF document, how does that come into play? That being fed as navigation or part of the taxonomy of the page and ranking within the website itself?
So in PDFs, I'm not sure if you're dumping them all into one folder structure or if you're still dropping them into the same folder structure that they kind of reside in from a taxonomy perspective. I know that certain aspects of a PDF file do show up in the search engine rankings. It's a little bit harder to get that content to rank, but it's definitely there. I would say the proper things to focus on from a PDF perspective would be the title of the PDF and what directory structure you actually host that file from. Does that make sense?
It does, but it also sounds like there's probably some benefit in taking some of that key information that might be contained within the PDF and surfacing that as HTML within a page separately.
I would always go for the HTML content if I wanted it to rank on the search engine. The PDFs can rank, but I'm highly in favor of putting that in HTML and making it more web friendly.
Thank you.
Can you pull up the keywords just through Google Analytics?
You can pull up keywords through Google Analytics. With Analytics, what you'd be looking at here are just the ones that you're currently ranking for, and I talk about that as well. I'm big on advanced segmentation in Google Analytics and actually segmenting first by search engine and then segmenting out all branded terms. We should look at branded terms and unbranded terms separately. Obviously, as our brand gets bigger, our branded terms increase. As our authority on the web gets bigger for our niche, those non-branded terms should increase.
So Google Analytics can show the unbranded terms?
Yes. Yeah. You have to put it in the advanced segmentation actually if the keyword does not contain and put your branded terms in there. And your branded misspellings as well. So when we talk about building your site as an authority and doing this link building, I could talk about link building for hours. I do want to talk about some of the things that can get you hurt. I'll talk about some of the good positive ways you can do it. But what we really want to do is make your site a hub and make yourself the authority for your niche. That's the best way to create links, right? If you can be the authority for a specific topic, it's going to be easier for you to get people to link to you, and it's also going to build links for you naturally. But when I talk about links, I like to think of links like electoral votes, right? You can win the race with less votes, right? The electoral votes, I think it takes 270 to win the U.S. presidential election. Correct me if my math is wrong. You can win the election with 11 states. You can lose the populace vote, but win the election. Same thing is true with links. You don't need more links, you need the best links. Certain links are counted more. A link from CNN is going to cost or be worth a heck of a lot more than andrewsblog.com, just by nature. I mean, I think that goes without saying. When we look at linking opportunities, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. If you go out and start researching linking opportunities, you might find this awesome blog post from 2007 that talks about getting directory links. Actually, that's 2006, right? And you know what? It worked in 2006. It was a great tactic. You can go out and submit to thousands of directories, and overnight your rankings will increase. Well, you know what? Algorithm change. Google found out about that. They understand that people were manipulating the rankings like that, so they shut it down and they penalized a lot of people that were doing that, right? So link building needs to be very creative. You don't want to do anything that's malicious. There's a lot of things that you could do from a PR perspective, from guest blogging perspective, to get your voice out there. I mean, that's what we're really trying to do here, is we're trying to get people to talk about us, to link to us. I want to share with you something that happened, and again, I like putting scare tactics in here. How many people know about the JCPenney debacle from 2011? 2? 3? JCPenney ranked fairly well in the holiday season of 2010. I wouldn't say they were dominating the SERPs for their terms by any means, but they definitely created a lot more authority, and they were definitely higher up in the rankings. New York Times came out in February and talked about how JCPenney was buying links aggressively. Now, these weren't just any bought links. There was no relevancy behind it. So if I was linking to my sneakers page, it was coming from a page about electronics or umbrellas, right? There was just no reason for that link being on the page. And some of those links were surrounded by pornography and gambling and other places that aggressively go and try to attack links. These are tactics that you often see in affiliates and resellers that don't care about their sites, that try very hard just to get onto page one. They churn and burn through sites like crazy. And that was the tactic we were seeing on JCPenney, which is very rare to see from coming through a brand that wants to stick around for a little while, right? What happened is they outsourced to an agency. I'm not going to name the agency here. There's plenty of articles out there. You can figure that out. Who went through the link building tactics, and, you know, they didn't manage what their agency was doing. They didn't take a look at what their agency was doing. But they did well, and they collected a lot of money in the end. So what happened when New York Times released this article about, I want to say it's the dirty tactics of SEO, I think they called it, or something like that. Google caught wind of this and immediately shut them down, like overnight, just filtered them back. Gave them a manual action, right, a manual penalty. That being said, who knows? They probably knew about it beforehand, but JCPenney had a certain amount of authority that they probably were doing okay based on authority alone, and the links definitely helped out a little bit. That being said, they were removed, and the red lines you see here are when they had manual action. Just so you know why we have this data, we are the Conductor is the data provider for the Internet Retailer 500. So we, as you can imagine, we crawl a lot of keywords on a regular basis. We can actually go back and pick out specific URLs. There's some manual action on our side that has to take place to go back and retroactively harvest some of this information. But we do have it at our disposal. What we see here is they were gone for many months, and then they popped back in very quickly. What you're seeing here, the dark green, I should have prefaced this at the beginning. This is from Searchlight. This is from our software platform. The dark green are keywords that are ranking in positions 1 to 3. Light green are the rest of page 1. Yellow is page 2. Orange is page 3 and 4, and red is anywhere from 5 to 100. They came back a little bit towards the months of June and July. Then they came back a little stronger after being removed completely, but they're still not back to the place that they were before. When you think about link building, make sure that you're building links in an authoritative way. The best way of doing link building is to go out, find people for your niche keywords, look up your primary keyword, find out if you're a go intent or a do intent keyword. We talked about do, no, go earlier. Find those informational people who are ranking, right? People who don't share the same conversion metric as you, and reach out to them, share content with them, blog for them, write for them. Somehow get them to all of a sudden start talking about you or linking to you, so you become more of an authority in that space. You know that they're ranking, right? They're ranking deeper in the search engine algorithm, so you know that they're still indexed, they're not penalized. you've already done your due diligence to find out that you want that association and just start building quality relationships. Does that make sense? And like I said, we can go into a lot of these in more detail. I know at 20 minutes I want to open up for Q&A. There's going to be a link to this in the notes. This was put out earlier this week by John Cooper. It's probably about 100 or 200 different link building campaigns that you can execute on. Has it based on risk, based on ease of implementation, and based on impact of the type of link that they will provide. Protecting your brand online, I highly suggest each of you doing this. I'm not affiliated with this site either. It's a site called Noam. This is a paid product. What this will do is if you go to noam.com, K-N-O-W-E-M, type in your brand name, and then look through the different social media aspects, you will see if it's available online. You can also see if people are squatting on your brand name. If they're not squatting on your brand name, the thing that I like about Noam is they don't hide where they go and they secure your name. You can easily go after this yourself and go to each one and secure your social media profiles. Or you can have Noam do it for you and proactively do it as new social media sites show up, right? This is all about brand protection. The good thing about this is some of these also act as links, right? You create a new social media profile on some of these sites, and you get a link back to your site. It's typically a URL, but again, make sure nobody's squatting on your brand. Creating the SEO culture. A lot of times there's a lot to do in SEO, and I get that and I understand it. I know there's a lot of technical stuff to do, a lot of marketing stuff to do. Every site that we talk to, 100%, there's no exception to the rule, are in a reactive state of SEO when they start focusing on it, right? They don't really know what they've done wrong because it's just been status quo for years. Now, obviously, the bigger the site, the bigger the ship, the harder it is for them to change direction and start doing the things properly. What we try to do is take people from this reactive state to a proactive state. And a lot of times, this is where the sales aspect of SEO comes in, right? This is where you're going and you're giving the training to your team. When you go back to the office tomorrow, going back and teaching some of the people what you learned about SEO or guiding people through the proper technical aspects of doing a 301 redirect in PHP as opposed to cold fusion. You know, showing them the proper use cases. Doing that on a consistent basis definitely pays dividends because if we can get the site to turn into an SEO culture, you are going to see big wins because everybody is focused on it. And this is what I did at Red Ventures. When I took it from that proof of concept to the multi-person channel with a lot of revenue, every site that they created went through the SEO team. We owned the site release process. SEO was part of QA. If something was released, any code was released, there was an SEO check on it. And this is providing a culture, right? We're getting other people to get checkpoints within SEO. Yeah. So international, that's a really good point. If you've got a section of your site that's geared towards Canada, the UK, towards China, there are certain things you can do. I know you can do this in Google. You can identify a specific site or a specific directory or subdirectory that's geared to a geo-specific area or country-specific area. When you're building out that content, you definitely want to make sure that it has a distinct URL structure, especially if you're duplicating content for specific countries because there's different price metrics. And if anything's different between the content, you want to make sure it has its own unique directory structure. If you're keeping the same directory structure and you just want the site to rank well in google.ca or .uk or Zandex or any other search engine, just make sure that the outreach and the links are coming from other sites within that area. So other sites with the .ca are still linking to your content, right? Don't just centralize all of your link building activities to localized IPs. Does that make sense? You want to make sure to expand your reach. And that's a lot where the link building strategies come in. You want the IPs from all of those different areas to be linking to as well. So it definitely makes yourself a little bit more creative from the link building perspective, and definitely someplace you're going to want to spend some time. Identifying your top markets. Do you have other markets, and which ones are they? Okay.
For example, how about if a newsgrid has like a newsgrid.co.uk, how about if somebody else knows that, URL,
so somebody has a URL and has a similar business model, perhaps. So that's probably going to cause some headaches for you, especially over in UK-based queries, like people from that are using that search engine and are geolocated over there. For big brands, I typically recommend that they secure all of their branded domains and keep those. You know what I'm saying? Keep the .uk. I mean, I know it's expensive holding on to domains for a long period of time, but the last thing you want is squatters. Same thing with protecting your brand through social media. You should protect your brand through directories as well. Does that make sense? Or did I say directories? I meant domains. Sorry. When I talk about going to a proactive state of SEO, a lot of parts of the organization have different maturity levels of SEO, and I think what we need to do there is really look at what needs to happen. I click forward. What do we need to do for each part of the organization? Some might need more education, where others might need more evangelism, or more hand-holding, or more advisory. And then tracking the success. You know, I'm going to talk about this in terms of being impacted within the search engine. But this goes true with any time that you're going through. You know, in CPR, we talk about ABCs, right? Airway, breathing, and circulation. I'm going to speed up just a little bit. I know we've got about 10 more minutes. When we talk about SEO and we're doing the analysis, what we talk about is obviously analytics, analysis, analytics go hand in hand. Backlinks and blogs. We also want to talk about code and contacts. And believe it or not, contacts play a big play in analytics. So from an analytics perspective, you definitely need to look at day-of-the-week analytics and do that comparison, right? So make some scheduled reports through Google or through your SEO platform to make sure you're getting these reports on a weekly basis and looking at those deltas. Also, segment by search engine. If you fall from all search engines, it wasn't an algorithm change. You weren't impacted by that. If you just fell by Google, something happened, right? They're based on their algorithm. Look at the keywords that are losing or gaining traffic and collect a list of those URLs as well. I'm just going to fly through a couple of these. Backlinks we talked about are very important, and so are the blogs. There's a lot of things that you can read out there that are going to give you a lot of different directions. Be very, very cautious when you're looking up a strategy online and you're reading a couple blog posts about it. If they don't have a date on the post itself, be a little bit cautious. Okay, a lot of things that worked a couple years ago will get you in big trouble today. So, you know, there's a lot of top-tier blogs out there. Search Engine Watch is great. Search Engine Land, another great resource. SEO Roundtable, Matt Cutts himself has said that Barry is like his SEO canary for the coal mine, right? He's constantly calling saying something's going on. So SEO Roundtable I'm on, you know, almost daily. And Webmaster World gives you some really great insight on web publishing. Don't be afraid to post anonymously on Webmaster World. Their terms of services say you can't post a link or say who your site is, which is great because if you have a question and you're on Webmaster World, you can ask it. They've got a really great community that is going to answer your question, but they're not going to, you don't have to out your site, right? Even if you're doing something that you think could be malicious, it's not going to get you in trouble. It's like, hey, I was doing this, and they'll give you a best or worst case scenario. Always look in WebmasterTools for any messages. Google has started sending out messages if they feel that you're not abiding by the quality guidelines. I know I'm just flying through. I want to make sure I can get through some questions here. Code and contacts, you know, definitely check, you know, your release cycle. Check what's going through QA. If you can put SEO into the QA cycle, that's going to save you a lot of headaches going forward. If a certain part of your site is taken down and you don't know about it, that can really cause some headaches from a traffic perspective. Do the audits constantly. Audit your recommendations on what you can do from an on-site perspective. And reach out to people. You know, as you network, as you get to know people, you met some people here today. Obviously, you know FirstMark, you know Conductor. If you see something that just doesn't feel right, that just doesn't seem right, reach out. Are other people seeing that as well? Because a lot of times when you're seeing it that day, if it's happening across the industry, we'll start hearing about it that day, but we won't know the entire impact of it for another week or so as people begin to talk. Analytics and reporting, obviously you don't know how you're doing in the SEO. There's hundreds of keywords you want to track. This is a screenshot from our application. This is Searchlight. It's a very detailed application. We do a lot of competitor analysis. We do a lot of categorical reporting, keyword reporting, and also setting goals and doing task management. Find some way to do that internally, be it through Searchlight or some other tool. You need to be able to track your progress. You can't really do that through Google Analytics. You can see which keywords are driving traffic. You just don't know if they're rising or falling within your primary keywords. You want to make sure you're tracking those. And there's a bunch of tools that can help you do that. Analytics. If you can tie your analytics back to keyword performance based on keyword ranking performance, you're going to be even more stronger in SEO. So if you can say, okay, now I got to page 1, I got X more visits, holy cow, I got X more conversions, that's where you really start, raising eyebrows within your organization. That's where people understand that you're not just managing a marketing channel, you're managing a business. SEO itself is kind of a mini business inside your business, right? Look at the conversion rate optimization. Look at what keywords drive the highest conversions and focus on those. So really put some good business metrics around how you're focusing on your SEO. And lastly, I know we've got about 5 to 10 minutes. I want to open up the floor for anything specific to your site, anything that didn't make sense in this presentation, any feedback, welcomed.